If you have ADHD, you not only see the world through a different lens, but view relationships around you through a different lens, which is something that I feel is like a little bit less talked about, the dynamics between you and the people around you, because we kind of ride high on certain thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And when we don't have that wind there to support us, we kind of fall pretty far down. And this affects our relationships. And this looks odd to people that don't know what it's like to ride through life in waves of peaks and valleys and high and low. But not only am I here to tell you that this can be a very beautiful thing, as I'm sure you kind of already know. I'm going to share with you some of what I do to make my ADHD serve me and not the other way around. Also, real quick, I am sick. My whole family is sick. You'll probably hear everybody sneezing and coughing in there. But I have to film this video. I've wanted to make this video for a long time. I've been working on it for a long time. I actually believe it's going to be one of the more comprehensive videos on ADHD from someone who has ADHD, from someone who's highly successful with ADHD, and how you can do the same, okay? Moving on. I've gathered up what I call the 4 B's of ADHD, and if you can go through them one by one and understand them and master them, your ADHD will start to feel a lot more like a friend than an enemy. I know the 4 B's is kind of corny, but bear with me, it works, and the first one I want to talk about is blame. Let's be honest. Blame is one of the hardest things to kind of let go of when you have ADHD. It kind of sneaks up on you in quiet moments, in the middle of mistakes, and especially when you're looking back at the day that didn't go the way you would have hoped. You know, maybe you forgot an important deadline, maybe you didn't prepare well enough, you got stuck in a procrastination loop, you got distracted during a conversation, and a thing that happens a lot is you blurted out something that just like landed poorly with the people around you because you really didn't think about it before you said it. You kind of just said it, and then it hits. You're like, why can't I just get my shit together? Why am I like this? But here's the thing, it's not about the mistakes you make. It's not about those slip ups. Blame is such a heavy weight. You know, the thing about it is it doesn't help anything. It doesn't give you solutions or a way forward. Blame in and of itself is a static thing. It just keeps you locked in a cycle of frustration and regret and guilt. But here's what I want you to know. ADHD is obviously not your fault. Let me say that again. ADHD is obviously not your fault, okay? Science doesn't think so. Society doesn't think so. And a lot of people with ADHD tend to blame themselves, but it's been around long enough and the conversation is big enough now that there's really no need for it. So let's start with why blame is so easy to fall into. ADHD brains are just wired differently. We struggle with things like working memory, impulse control, emotional regulation. Research published in the Journal of Clinical Psychology back in like 2018 shows that people with ADHD are more likely to experience what psychologists call rejection-sensitive dysphoria. It just means that we're hyper-aware of criticism on like multiple levels. We can see it from our perspective, their perspective, someone seeing the criticism from a third-party perspective. We're like hyper-aware of criticism around us, okay? And we're more likely to internalize that criticism. In short, we feel blame more deeply because our brains are more tuned to pick it up. And I don't think that there's anybody more educated and knowledgeable and insightful on the topic of ADHD, specifically when discussing how we internalize that blame and those criticisms than Dr. Gabermate, okay? He explains that like if you grew up in a stressful, chaotic, even overly rigid environment, you may have learned to tune out as a way to cope, right? And it's that tuning out that helped you survive then, but when you grew up, it became a pattern of behavior leading to symptoms like distractibility or inattention, and it doesn't serve you as an adult. It served you as a kid, right? It also doesn't mean that it was a result of bad parenting or some catastrophic event or huge trauma. It just means that your brain learned how to protect itself in the best way that it could at the time, which was to tune out, to not engage with reality, which is one of the reasons why blame keeps you stuck. In 2016, a study in psychiatric research found that self-blame not only increases stress, but also impairs our ability to problem solve. So we can't even think about a way to get out of this stressful situation that we're in. For people with ADHD, who are already navigating executive dysfunction, executive functions of the brain, like working memory and all that, it makes it even harder to get things done. Think about it. Often blaming yourself never really leads to positive change. Okay. That's it. I'm a big fan of like negative motivation and turning all those negative feelings that you have into a force for good and using it, but just straight blame, it's not actionable. It doesn't do anything. It's not good. And also, we kind of need to talk about the sneaky cousin of self-blame, right? Which is like blaming others. It's easy to say, if only my parents had understood me better or my teachers understood me better. Fuck, I get stuck in that one a lot, dude. While those feelings are valid, okay, especially the teacher one, that's a big one for me personally. Really hard to let go of kind of how fucking cruel those ladies were to me growing up. Right? They're also, those feelings are traps. They give away your power to circumstances or people that you really can't control. And the truth is, blaming others is terrible. Pretty much throughout the thousands of years of the written word of wisdom, blaming others has never really been a positive thing in one's life. So accountability, realizing it's your problem. Any problems that it might cause, they're your problems. They're not other people's problems, and you shouldn't make them other people's problems, and you also shouldn't blame other people for them. I feel like that's preaching to the choir a little bit. We're all kind of self-aware of this, but I have to throw that out there because some people, a lot of people, still like to enter the blame game. Get the fuck out. It's a waste of your time, dude. There's way better shit that you're going to be doing with your time, and we're going to talk about it. So the key is the shift, right? You need to shift from blame to understanding. So the alternative here, okay, it's not about ignoring the challenges that ADHD brings or pretending the mistakes don't matter. It's about replacing blame with understanding. When something goes wrong, ask yourself, what's actually happening in my brain right now? What are the feelings that I'm feeling? What are the patterns of behavior that are cropping up? Is this something new to me? Do I do it before? Do I catch myself constantly doing this thing? How do I stop it? You just need to be aware of how you're responding to certain situations, right? And here's an example from my life. I used to beat myself up every time I forgot an appointment or lost track of times because not only am I shitty at remembering these appointments, I'm shitty at writing them down or doing reminders. And I'd spiral into these thoughts like, dude, you're so irresponsible. Like you can't even trust yourself to like show up on time and like do a thing, right? But when I started learning about ADHD, I realized that my brain struggles with something called time blindness. In 2020, there was a study in the Neuropsychology Review that explains that ADHD affects our perception of time pretty severely. We tend to, this is the superpower thing that we're talking about. We're going to get to that. And basically, it's like a black and white way that we see time. We tend to live in the now, or we tend to live in the not now, which makes it hard to plan or anticipate future consequences because we either cut off from the present or cut off from the future. It's hard for us to balance both. Once I understood this, I stopped blaming myself for like not caring enough or whatever, being too lazy to write down the appointment or set a reminder. And I started looking for tools to work with my brain. And honestly, a big one is like an Alexa or like Siri on your phone or something that you don't have to pull out, open up, type it out, something that you can just with your voice say like, hey, set a reminder for this date, give it this label, and trying to make it like a hands-free experience to set reminders for yourself to do shit. And when you get really, really, really busy and you got reminder after reminder, it's nice to look on my Google Calendar and actually see like 2 to 3 reminders every single day of like managing my life. Right? That's how often I'm like adding stuff to it. There's stuff that I need to constantly be remembering. And it's funny because like if I didn't have that technology or even really thinking about what it was like before I started doing that, everything would just snowball. And it would be like this blame spiral where I was so upset with myself. And to other people, like I looked super irresponsible because I just like, it seemed like I didn't care or I was too lazy. And it's hard to say that that's not what it was because it looks like that and it feels like that, but it just feels honestly like a different kind of wiring in the brain. You know, the main thing too is like understanding as a tool is powerful, but how do you actually practice like understanding? Well, here are some fresh research-backed steps to shift out of blame and into a more compassionate mindset. You might think about creating what's called a reframe journal, which is a really interesting concept because if you're like me, I got journals on the shelf behind me. I buy one, I fill out the first, couple pages, and then I almost feel like I don't want to ruin the pristineness of the journal. So like I stop because like I don't know how to be organized within a journal. Okay, cool. If that's you and you want a journal and you don't know how, check out a reframe journal. And a reframe journal is a pretty simple concept, which is at the end of each day, you just write down one thing where like ADHD kind of tripped you up and you write it kind of as you felt it, right? I kind of messed up in that meeting. I said the wrong thing. I was ill prepared, blah, 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 blah. And then you reframe it. You say, I struggle with working memory, first person perspective, but I can improve this with systems. Tomorrow, I'll set 2 alarms instead of 1. Instead of procrastinating, I will do this. And you're just kind of using your journal to make promises to yourself and analyze some of the stuff that happens to you day to day. And this is a really simple practice that was supported by a research study by Cognitive Therapy and Research in 2015 that says like the reframing journal as a solution to people with ADHD, it literally improves your problem solving. It actually lessens the degree that your ADHD will cause you to procrastinate and make mistakes. It will improve your working memory. So that's an easy thing to do. Plus, it just feels kind of good to journal at the end of the day. It lowers your heart rate, lowers stress. You're kind of just like sitting down. And we're going to get into rituals later on in the video and how important they are for people with ADHD. But a reframe journal, keep that in the back of your head. We're going to talk about it later. The other thing you can do that's pretty huge, that I do a lot, is practice self-talk out loud. When you catch yourself blaming yourself for ADHD, pause and say something kind out loud. Say something like, okay, that didn't go as I would have planned, but it's a chance to learn. My brain is wired differently. That's okay. I'm not going to get down on myself. I'm not going to let it snowball into negativity. Studies ubiquitously show that speaking affirmations aloud engages the brain in an auditory processing center that it basically makes the message stick more effectively. So like you will actually, it's like you talking to the cells within your body. And I think that studies from Psychological Science 2014. Self-affirmations. Everybody that practices self-affirmations says that they work. Like you either have done them and know they work, or you don't do them and think that they don't work. But anyone who's done them knows that they work. So do it. And there's some really good resources out there for people that want to understand kind of what is going on with their brain, what's going on with their ADHD. A really good one is Dr. Russell Barkley's lectures or books, Driven to Distraction. So good. There was like this study that was also done in like 2017 that found that people who actively learned about ADHD were better at managing symptoms and experience less self-criticism. I think that that's probably true of everything. Understanding it more kind of takes the fear away from it, or the negativity out of it. And so really just arming yourself with education, knowledge, understanding will help you to overcome some of the problems of ADHD. And just real quick, like one of the things I want to talk about is, if you have a task that falls through the cracks, an appointment, blah, 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 maybe your to-do list is too overwhelming, right? You can break it into smaller steps. You can add reminders, the hands-free reminders like what we're talking about, because I just want people to remember the problem isn't you, it's your systems, okay? And I have a weird system for keeping my days orderly. I made a whole video about it that's already on this channel called When Productivity Hacks Don't Work, Do This. I use a totem system that I kind of invented instead of using lists, and it works. It's great. It's emotional, so you can feel good about your day. And if that sounds interesting to you, I'll leave a link in the description. Back to blame. The next time ADHD trips you up, don't waste your energy blaming yourself or anyone else. Instead, right? We're not trying to get stuck on that. We're trying to move forward. We're like, what's the lesson here? What can I adjust? How can I create a better system to make sure this doesn't happen again? Information that helps you build a better system for next time, right? Those are what you should be hunting for. Tips, tricks, hacks, trying things out. Everybody's different. Different stuff's going to work for different people. But the main thing here is just remember that ADHD, it's not a moral failing. It doesn't make you a bad person. It's a different way of navigating the world. And when you let go of blame, you free yourself and you find solutions that actually work. Okay. So that's a really good place for us all to start. Even people without ADHD, learn to stop blaming yourself and others. It doesn't do anybody any good. The second B I want to talk about is boundaries. Boundaries. These are super important. People with ADHD hear the word boundaries, and it can have a really negative connotation for people that have impulse control issues because they feel like yet another set of rules or restrictions. But here's the thing. It's not the boundaries and the restrictions that cause us heartache. It's the struggle to stick to them, even when we know they're good for us, okay? ADHD brains, all brains, but especially ADHD brains, don't like being boxed in. But here's the twist. Boundaries aren't walls that trap you. They're fences that protect you. They're good for you. They're not about limiting your freedom. They're about creating space for the things that matter to you most and making sure that other things don't come into your bubble and ruin your priority system that you've built for yourself. So here's an important fact. ADHD thrives on novelty. We are wired to chase shiny new things. Dive headfirst into exciting projects, full steam ahead, obsessive, and say yes to every opportunity that sparks our interest. That's just how they're wired, right? I love that part of it, to be honest. It's a gift. But without boundaries, that gift can leave us extremely scattered, not doing well in any areas, overwhelmed, burnt out, and just generally like feeling disappointed because we were excited, we lose that steam, we don't have a lot to show for it. It's not a good way to be. Boundaries are the secret to channeling that energy into actually successfully completing things, feeling good about it, rather than feeling depleted and drained and not accomplishing our tasks. And one of the things we have to do is we kind of have to talk about why setting boundaries and sticking to them are so hard for people that are wired with ADHD. Yes, it has to do with a struggle of impulse control. It has to do with time blindness. It has to do with emotional regulation. We tend to let our emotions lead us, all of which make it almost impossible to say no, plan ahead, or recognize that we are overcommitting to things that we should not be. For example, you might say yes to an exciting project because it sounds fun, only to realize later that it clashes with like 3 other commitments you have, and you have an appointment on that day, and you already said yes to this thing. Or maybe you agree to help a friend move, even though you desperately need a day to recharge and reset your brain. There's so many examples of me doing this, people with ADHD doing this, and there's something I want to talk about. There was a study that was published in 2019 in the Journal of Attention Disorders, and it said all adults with ADHD are more likely to overcommit, not recognize that they're doing so, and being stretched too thin just seemed like a part of life for these people. This isn't about lack of effort or care. It's simply how our brains work. But here's the good news, okay? Once we understand this, we can start building boundaries that work for us. So that way, when we are riding those high peaks of ADHD and tunnel vision and creativity and getting work done and productivity that feel great, we don't have to fall off a cliff from fucking burnout, right? We can build a safety net for ourselves so that way we don't fall so far, so hard. This is why you get burnt out, because you prioritize too much shit. So you got to think of boundaries as tools that protect our energy and our time and our focus. They're not about saying no to everything. They're about saying yes to the right things. For me, this shift happened when I stopped thinking about boundaries as barriers and started seeing them as just prioritizing systems and allowing myself to slide between priorities in a way that was comparable to where I placed the priority previously. If something's a number 1 priority and I have to slide down to number 6, I treat number 6 like number 6 because I already agreed with myself what my number 1 priority was. I don't treat everything like it's number 1 priority. Boundaries is really just a good system of prioritizing your stuff. So even if you're terrible at making lists, you need to make you don't need a to-do list. To-do lists are fucking death for people with ADHD. They're just, you don't even have the energy to write them, let alone follow them. But you do need to make a list for your priorities because that's going to be your roadmap to making sure that your time and energy and focus is well spent where you want it spent the most, period. So remember we talked about reframing, right? Instead of asking, what do I need to say no to today? Ask, what do I need to protect? What is my number 1 thing, my number 1 goal, right? This could be your mental health. It could be your time. It could be your time with your loved ones. It could be your ability to finish a passion project that you're working on. When you think about boundaries as acts of self-care rather than restrictions, they become a lot easier to enforce and follow. And you start to realize like, damn, I'm actually kind of like organizing my life a little bit. That feels good. For someone with ADHD that really hasn't had a grasp on that before, it can actually be kind of life-changing, dude. So let's talk about types of boundaries. First, time boundaries. ADHD brains are notorious for time blindness. We underestimate how long things take and we lose track of time, sometimes entirely. That's why setting clear boundaries around your schedule is so important. For example, set focus hours. You can also do this on your phone. Your phone will give you custom modes where you can set the focus and only certain notifications will break through. Super handy. But what I mean by focus hours is that during the day, there's only certain hours that you check your emails or take calls, right? You can use visual timers or whatever you got to do, but you need to keep track of how long you've been working. And like one of the biggest parts of this is there was a study in Neuropsychology Review in 2020 that said having visual cues using some type of visual timer helps people with ADHD complete tasks. So not only is time tracking important because it'll let you see kind of how you're spending your time and using focus parameters on your phone to make sure that distractions aren't coming through, but just using technology to your advantage around you in a way where you can complete tasks is so important. This is actually kind of the golden age of ADHD because we're able to utilize that higher electrical activity that happens in our brain to produce focus and productivity. And we can mitigate some of the fall off and the stress and overwhelming pressures that accompany that by using things like time boundaries. Pretty cool. You also have energy boundaries. Not all tasks are created equal. Some drain us more than others, okay? ADHD brains often hyper-focus on exciting tasks, leaving little energy for anything else, especially mundane tasks that don't feel fun at all. We just decide not to do those. Very bad. Don't ever hire like an ADHD data entry person. Nothing will get done. And what's interesting about this is there's like an inverse relationship. By using a time boundary like a tracker, you can see it running out. And there's something kind of exciting about that because you know that time's slipping away, you need to get this thing done. ADHD brains tend to work really well with that kind of pressure. Inversely, social boundaries. ADHD often comes with rejection sensitive dysphoria, or RSD. I've already talked about it a little bit, but it makes it hard for us to like say no to people because we fear disappointing them. But overcommitting socially can lead to resentment or exhaustion and a lot of bad shit. Practice saying, I'd love to help, but I can't really commit to that right now. Can I let you know if my something changes because I just can't do it right now? You need to figure out a way to give yourself polite ways to say no rather than overextending yourself. I think people with ADHD, and this is so true, bro, we have a way of making fast friends off the bat and then looking kind of flaky later on in the relationship and then kind of letting those relationships kind of just wither away and die because we don't view them as a priority anymore because we get shiny new thing syndrome when we move on to the next thing or person or relationship or whatever it might be. And that right there is a perfect example of how it really can ruin your relationship. So you need to be in control of your energy, your priorities. You need to take care of relationships. And you ironically do that by taking care of yourself in the relationship. Another huge thing too is like digital boundaries, dude. Like, let's be real. ADHD and smartphones are a super dangerous combination. Without boundaries, it's easy to fall into like endless scrolling and like app coping, dude. It's really, really bad. I have to be hyper aware of it, dude, because I will lose hours and feel like shit because of it. That's why I use tools like focus mode on my phone to make it to where like at certain parts of the day, certain notifications just don't get let through because I need to focus, okay? I set my own work hours and I have to be really strict about that. There was like this 2018 study in cyber psychology, behavior, and social networking that found that reducing screen time improved attention spans in ADHD adults. And that's like real shit. That's like actually you being able to increase your attention span with ADHD, okay? By reducing screen time. Having too much screen time can literally ruin the way that your brain is wired. You need to be hyper aware of it. You need to be super in control of your screen time, dude. And there's a lot of actionable steps actually for like building ADHD friendly boundaries, right? There's like the one thing rule, which is basically you just pick one thing that's your number one priority every day. So you don't treat everything like it's your number one priority every day and nothing gets done, right? Every morning you decide that there's one thing that absolutely must get done that day, all right? Protect that task at all costs, whether it means rescheduling meetings, turning off your phone, or even asking for help, which can be hard. This focuses your energy, dude, and creates a sense of accomplishment. And if there's one thing that you need with ADHD, it's that sense of accomplishment and the momentum that it creates to get more and more shit done, especially the shit that you don't want to do. You can also, and this is kind of a cool one, schedule your no's. Set specific times when you'll check emails, take calls, and handle requests. Outside those times, everything else can wait. This creates like a really natural boundary without requiring constant decision making, which is something that people with ADHD get really burned out on because we can't plan ahead. So everything feels like an in the moment decision. Shit gets skipped and missed and forgotten. Guys, make decisions about your day and your priorities and your time and your energy ahead of time. There's also another cool little thing you can do as far as a trick, and you can create transition rituals, right? Remember I talked about how rituals are really important. ADHD brains struggle with switching between tasks, like toddlers. So build 5-minute rituals to help you transition smoothly. After work, take a short walk, stretch, do something. Do something for 5 minutes between tasks because it's in that 5 minute valley between tasks that we tend to overthink. We didn't prepare for the transition, so we're going to think about way too much shit during it. We might even talk ourselves out of the thing that we're supposed to do next. These rituals create boundaries between different parts of your day. You really, really need to think about how you can prepare for future you, because you need to plant seeds now so future you has fruits, right? That's what it's all about. That's what ADHD kind of ruins. It ruins future you. So the main thing to think about is like boundaries aren't there to like shut things out. They're about letting the right things in. They're about giving yourself the structure and support that you need to thrive with a brain that is wired differently. Start small. Pick one area of your life where you feel stretched too thin, and then just start setting up little boundaries there for yourself, okay? It might feel uncomfortable at first, but like I promise, it's worth it. It's worth it to be in control of your time and energy and your mind. With the right boundaries in place, dude, I would even say like you can literally take control of your ADHD and ride it like a black stallion right across the finish line. Like you can really turn this thing into something that works for you rather than the other way around. All right. And that's what this video is all about. That's what's really important about having this conversation and arming yourself with knowledge. Be aware of signs, triggers, systems, patterns, behaviors. Don't give yourself an out. Be accountable for them. All right. So we got blame. We got boundaries. Time for the next B. Balance. I think balance is super interesting for people that have ADHD because it's totally different than what people consider balance that don't have ADHD. Non-ADHD brains might see balance as a little bit of work, a little bit of rest, a little bit of food, a little bit of entertainment, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And that's a nice pre-portioned day. And you put a little bow on it of predictability and planning. And it's like, that was a nice, well-rounded day. That's not how ADHD brains work at all. For us, balance is balancing the absolute rocket fuel that is the energy behind the shit that we get excited about while trying to cope with all the priorities that we are disregarding around us in order to get tunnel vision on that thing and then try to mitigate the fallout damage from procrastinating and just not doing that shit while also trying to lessen the blow of the inevitable fall off the energy cliff. That's balance to someone that has ADHD. So for ADHD, balance can be about just learning how to ride the waves properly, right? Let's start with why balance is so hard to achieve for ADHD brains that are wired differently, because they're wired differently in two very important key ways. Dopamine regulation. ADHD brains have lower baseline levels of dopamine. This is a chemical responsible for motivation and reward. This is a problem. This means we chase stimulating activities, like with hyperfocus, but we burn out quickly when the dopamine levels drop. It's almost like our body knows it's a finite resource, and so we have to use, as much of it as possible, as quickly as possible to get our number one priority done. The problem is when we view everything as a number one priority, nothing really gets done. Second huge difference between a normal brain and an ADHD wired brain is time perception. I know I've already talked about this, but it's super important because if we can't conceptualize time, then we can't prepare for our future selves. We're stuck in this present moment where things that we need to take care of get rejected. And that's so damaging to our future plans, to our future self, to our future relationships, to everything, right? So realizing that you basically are incapable of quantifying time in an internal way can really help you to understand maybe what a huge part of your problem is. Right? Especially if you get trapped in that loop of perfectionism, which a lot of people with ADHD absolutely struggle with, dude, because we get so excited about this thing. We just want it to be so perfect, right? We found it shiny. We want to make it perfect, right? And there's a balance for ADHD brains that doesn't have to equal, we kind of need to balance progress with perfection, right? If that's kind of what I want to talk about. Being able to enjoy the process and the progress of a thing is kind of the downfall of many people that have ADHD, because we get in there, we like the laborious effort of trying to make it perfect, but we never get that dopamine payoff of actually reaching perfection, because how many of us can actually do that? The pursuit of perfection to a thing and the amount of work that you can do in a short amount of time doesn't negate the fact that that thing neither needs to be perfect or all of your time spent on it. And that's what I mean when I say the inability to be like, that thing actually doesn't have to get done by tomorrow. It can actually wait another day or two We are the ones setting that barrier in place for ourselves. And when you're thinking about balance, how many things in your life are you the one putting these false barriers in place and putting that pressure on, like a pressure cooker? How many of those fake barriers are you putting in place because somewhere deep down you systemically need that pressure to operate? That is something that like I deeply understand, but you have to be ultra aware of those barriers because they're hurting you. They're hurting your ability to balance what would actually be a more fruitful, more productive, believe it or not, life with better mental health. I'm just saying we need to aim for balance, right? We need to aim for balance in energy. ADHD is an energy roller coaster, dude. One moment you'll be unstoppable and the next you're kind of like completely drained, kind of like me right now being sick. I have zero energy to do this, but I committed. I'm getting it done. Learning how to manage this cycle of having energy and not is pretty fucking important. You have to be really internally aware of the natural energy that you have to give certain things, and then you have to spread that out like a resource and assign it to certain things. And if you do that, you will actually see a huge rise in productivity across the broad spectrum of the activities in your life and things that you need to be doing. Which brings me to the next point, which is like rest balance. ADHD brains are prone to burnout because we tend to push through exhaustion during hyperfocus because sometimes we're not even aware of the exhaustion, right? Rest isn't like a luxury. It's something that fuels your next peak. We're talking naps. We're talking no screen time. We're talking long showers or baths or whatever you need to do to just turn your mind off for a little bit. You can't have that thing power on 24/7. It doesn't do anybody any good. You know as well as I that you can get an absolutely incredible amount of stuff done in a very short amount of time. But just like you need to plan your energy with what your natural reserves allow, you need to plan your active rests, right? Just like stopping at a gas station to put gas in the car. You don't just keep driving, right? You need to pre-plan those pit stops, dude. It's super important. And on top of like task balance and energy balance and rest balance, there's also like emotional balance, all right? ADHD often comes with heightened emotional states and sensitivities, which can really throw us off, right? When things go wrong. Finding ways to regulate emotions. My power is flickering right now, dude. Please do not turn off. That would suck, bro. Where was I? Let me take that again. That emotional regulation is a compensation for our brain's inability to produce the dopamine that we need to drive our discipline. The last thing I really want to say on balance is like for ADHD, it's not about perfection or like strict schedules. It's about flexibility and adaptability, right? It's honoring the way that your brain works. Some days you'll be on fucking fire, and other days you'll need not just rest, but like to forget the world for a little bit, right? So it's really, really important to build rituals and resets and things that you can do and safety nets. So that way you're not constantly just zeroing in on what you believe, what you feel like needs to get done, right? You're keeping aware of the other stuff that needs to get done as well. Balance isn't about doing everything. It's about doing what matters most, more specifically in a way that works for you, that is sustainable. And if there's one thing I could just like leave you with on balance is tools, systems, apps, timers, totems, whatever you need to do to create a system of sustainability for you to have balance and not hit those peaks so hard and then hit those valleys so low. You need to do it because that's no way to live. Especially as you get older, that lack of sustainable energy gets more and more difficult. So start now. The fourth B is belief. The quiet but powerful force that can shape your relationship with ADHD is belief, my friends. It's not about believing in yourself though. That is part of it, but it's about believing that you can work with your brain instead of against it. Okay, believing that ADHD doesn't define you. It's simply a lens that you see the world through. Without belief, the strategies, tools, and routines that we build tend to crumble, believing that we can stick to a schedule. We can stick to these timers, believing that this will actually help us. We are the kind of person that can use this tool or thing to our advantage, and that It will help us. That's kind of a hard thing to accept, especially when you're first starting out trying to get a hold on this thing, right? Why belief is so hard for ADHD brains too is like, it's kind of wild, bro. For many of us with ADHD, belief can feel like a foreign concept. We've spent years internalizing messages like, you're lazy, or you're irresponsible, or why can't you just focus? You know, these messages come from school and work and even like well-meaning loved ones. But over time, they really, really start to chip away at your self-esteem. And this is a big part of why belief in betterment can kind of be a hard thing for people with ADHD. You know, there was a study that was published in ADHD Attention and Focus Quarterly back in 2017 that found out that adults with ADHD are more likely to struggle with self-doubt and negative self-talk and low self-esteem issues. You know, partly because neurodivergence makes you already feel pretty ostracized from the systems around you in society. But you know, this makes sense. Like when you think about it, you live in a world that values consistency and predictability, and your brain just flat out doesn't work that way. So it's easy to feel like you're not enough, that you don't quite fit into the jigsaw puzzle of life and society. But here's the truth, dude. You are enough. You just as you are, right? Without even doing anything to make your ADHD work for you. Just you as you are right now are great, and you're worth it. And you have to believe that. You really do. You know, ADHD, as much as like we all like to spin it like a positive vibe, like, oh, it's a superpower and I'm a workaholic. Ha ha ha. It also has some pretty fucking dark days, dude. When those emotions and those states of high emotional octane output aren't exactly working in our favor, and we feel like we're held underwater. For those moments specifically that I'm talking about, you really got to believe those moments are temporary and they don't define you. If belief feels impossible right now, that's okay. You don't really have to like start big with anything, right? You can start simple by saying like, I can handle today. I can handle this little task. I can do dishes. I can do the laundry real quick. I got time to take the trash out. You know, this number one priority thing that I got tunnel vision on. You know, I'm not going to die if I don't complete it right now. You establish a baseline of belief for who you are now as a person that is deserving of understanding and love and consideration, and also that there is another potential person that you are working towards that is equally deserving of all of that. And you got to fight for both. You got to fight for the person you are now, and you got to kind of fight for the person that you want to be. And that's a really weird statement for someone to hear that doesn't have ADHD. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm talking about people that have time blindness, dude. It can be really hard to think of and recognize delayed gratification, especially like it can be really hard to think about those things in a current context. And it's really hard to treat yourself with self-love and accountability in a way where future you is going to benefit. And it's really about breaking that cycle, dude, of shame and self-doubt that are so common. They're like common companions for ADHD. I'm sure they are for a lot of other people as well. You know, mental health is so important, dude. But belief that you can break that cycle of shame and self-doubt, you know, from an I can't learn this. I have a, you know, it's a disability, or this is too hard, or blah, 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 into just an I can statement. I can learn this. I will learn this. I'm determined to learn this. That self-belief, and people with ADHD, they're really good at believing. They have a lot of self-efficacy when, like I said, the peaks are high. When the peaks are low, they don't believe in themselves at all. And they talk themselves out of all those cool thoughts and feelings and emotions and plans and stuff that they made when they were on the peak, you know? And then when they get low, they say like, why did I think that? That was so stupid. I can't do that. No, you got to believe that you're capable of doing those things, regardless of whether you're in the peak or the valley, right? Rather than self-doubt, you got to build self-trust. You got to trust that you were right when you made those plans on the peaks. And you got to trust that when you're in the valleys, this shall pass too. When it does, you're going to go right back to nailing what you were. And that's how to stay, really, that's kind of how to stay consistent with ADHD, man. And I know I talk a lot about like creating momentum, right? I do believe that it's important. I also believe that belief fuels momentum. And in momentum is everything for our ADHD brains, everything that we could want, all the nutrition. When you believe you can tackle one task, it becomes easier to tackle the next and the next and the next, right? It's like a domino effect. That's why it's really important when you're setting your priorities the night before for the day ahead, to get some low-hanging fruits out of the way. Our brains, when it comes to dopamine, that reward center, we can really take advantage of that by getting small things done before we go to tackle the big things. Because sometimes it takes us a minute to build up that belief, man. And I guess like one of the points I want to make too when it comes to belief is, and it sounds contradictory, but you need to set impossible goals for yourself, and then you need to break them down into practical goals. You need to pick a goal that feels out of reach. Otherwise, it'll be uninteresting and you won't do it. Something you've always wanted to do but never thought you could, or you've taken some steps towards, but it's a long road. You just need to break it down into little tiny, manageable, bite-sized pieces, okay? There's something about having an impossible goal that's extraordinarily difficult to reach with a brain that has ADHD, where there's moments that you feel like it's so attainable and you're literally you have no problem taking one step up the mountain at a time. It doesn't bother you, no matter how far away the goal is, right? You don't need that instant gratification because you find peace in the tunnel vision of just trying to climb the mountain, right? And it's almost like, because we don't get that instant feedback loop of like dopamine receptors, we need to have the impossible goal, that challenge on the horizon, to make our brains work for us, you know? And I think that's actually like a big life-defining characteristic of like myself. Like my goals are like so incredibly lofty and so impossible. Some days I'm like, dude, why the fuck did I think I could do that? You know? And now I'm at the point where I just tell myself like, no. That's not a true statement. Like with the thing that you're saying to yourself right now, that's like not, you are who you are when you're balancing the high emotional states and the high energy states with the work done and having the passion and the goals. That's who you are. Who you are in the trenches, in the deep, and the negative self-talk. That's just moments when you need to be taking either rests or you need to be doing monotonous tasks that require zero thought. The last thing you need to be doing is thinking and second guessing the decisions you made when you were on cloud 9. Those cloud 9 things tend to be where dreamers become doers. And the stuff in the trenches tend to be where cynicism stops us from taking future actions. And that's not good. So we have to also kind of believe that like, hey man, this is us when we're up here, right? And who we are down here, that's just part of our life cycle. We're a balance of both. But really, at the end of the day, I really believe the person that I am up here is my best self. And my goal at all times, always, is to try to prioritize and organize my life in a way where I can be in that mentality and that headspace and that state of belief as often as possible. You know, and really, like blame, boundaries, balance, belief, you know, these are all relationships that we have with ourselves, with people around us, how we see the world, how the world sees us, how the world sees us has been like, especially like when you're little, right? Especially if you're old like me, where it's like they really didn't know kind of what the hell it was when you were like in first and second grade, and then teachers just kind of treated you like shit. You know, it's like that kind of stuff like really kind of sticks with you, dude. You know, it can be really hard to kind of realize that, oh, I guess I am different. And then it's a decision. Am I different good or am I different bad? And I think with ADHD, that's actually a decision you get to make. That's one of the luxuries of ADHD. You can choose to let it completely fuck up your life. You can also let it choose to be the thing that completely defines your life in the best way possible and turns dreamers into doers. There's nothing more ubiquitous than great ideas. Great ideas are a dime a dozen. What's rare is people that are able to actually execute on those ideas and stay passionate about them. And I think with people with ADHD are really good at doing that. So that's my comprehensive look into the world of ADHD, what it's like, some things I do, some actionable stuff you can do. It's very much more of a conversation between me and you. So let me know what you do, dude. Leave a comment down below. As always, I love you guys. I love hearing from you guys. If you got some stuff that works, tell me your tips and tricks, dude. I'm all ears. All right. Sorry, I'm sick on this one. I'll go drink a vitamin C and feel better on the next one. Peace.